Hello and welcome to episode 286 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyDadFF. The NFL season is over. The fantasy football season is over. The dynasty season is just beginning, baby. Snoog and I just brought you guys a bunch of, this is Smash Accept running back week. We've just brought you a show about all the 2025 rookies, which has me completely hyped up. I am excited to talk about these rookies. But today, what we're going to talk about right now is the veteran guys, the guys who are rising in value. Some people absolutely skyrocketed this year. Snoog, we hit hard on a lot of those guys. I'm interested to see how the landscape's going to change with the rookies. But man, we had 4 guys go up over 300 fantasy points. Guys that you and I like, Bijan, Gibbs, Saquon, and Derrick Henry all went up over that 300-point plateau. The running backs are back.
Yeah, this is something I actually highlighted in the offseason. I said this is going to be the year that we get multiple 300-plus point fantasy football running backs. And if you just discount injuries, Alvin Kamara was pacing 320-plus fantasy points. Devin Chain missed it by 0.01. He had like 399.9. And then Josh Jacobs had 296, and Kyron was very close as well. So phenomenal year. I'm excited for this show. I'm excited to jump into some of the risers and some of the best running back buys in the landscape right now, because guys like Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, these guys, Joe Mixon, they got these big veteran contracts in the offseason to go and play on the best teams they've ever played for. And they got to flash some of that ceiling that we all knew that they were capable of at a later age. So I'm excited to jump into this, talk about risers, talk about buys, and talk about kind of the landscape and some of these guys that you should be targeting and some of the years that they had.
So it's been well versed that you and I both say the only guy we're not trading in Dynasty right now is Brock Bowers. You can add Jahmyr Gibbs to that.
Yeah.
Jahmyr Gibbs is now the clear-cut Dynasty RB1. You and I have had him there for going on a month and a half now. I mean, I think Bijan still belongs in that tier 1 with him. But, man, if you did what we talked about in 2022 of rebuilding with the intent of building around these running backs, you're going to be able to do the same thing in 2025. And guys that are in the Discord, like Philip Fry, he's on YouTube here. He said, hey, fellas, make sure you guys hit that smash accept button on the subscribes. We're almost at 2,000. We appreciate all the support. But those guys that were in there, they know that we've been preaching, getting these guys, making sure we're taking care of it. I'm not trading Jahmyr Gibbs for pretty much anything right now. If it doesn't have Jefferson, Chase, an elite level quarterback, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to stay on my team now for the foreseeable future. Like him and Bowers are pretty much, I'm not touching it. What about you?
Yeah, Gibbs is like, me, obviously you're not getting Jahmyr Gibbs from me. I mean, it's been like that for over 2 years now, but he has cemented himself. I mean, granted, Saquon Barkley just didn't play in week 17. He was the real RB1 this year. But the fact that Jahmyr Gibbs put up 363 fantasy points this year, splitting carries with David Montgomery for most of the year, coming into the year with a hamstring injury and being very limited in the first few weeks, it's special for how talented he is. Like, if you just go back to the rookie draft process, like people had Zach Charbonnet over him. People said he wasn't a good pure runner between the tackles. People said he was undersized. No. You watch that dude on tape at Bama. You watched him at Georgia Tech. He was one of the best running backs I've ever seen coming out as a prospect since I've been doing this, and I started in 2019. So Jahmyr Gibbs is a dynasty cornerstone asset that is right there alongside like a Jamar Chase, a Justin Jefferson for me, and so is Bijan Robinson, honestly.
Yeah.
So
final 4 weeks of the season, and a lot of people were giving me flack saying, you know what, Dad, you have Jahmyr Gibbs as rest of the season higher than David Montgomery, and he's been right there in the same. Why did we have Gibbs top 3 and Montgomery outside the top 12? Because if Gibbs goes down to injury, Montgomery becomes a little bit better. We knew if Montgomery went down, geez, and you'll see he was RB2, RB7, RB2, RB1, and every single week over 30 fantasy points. I mean, like, this was Christian McCaffrey heyday on steroids almost. Like, this was what we were looking for, and I'm just super excited with all my shares of him. Guys, again, patreon.com/smash accept, $5, all those dynasty rankings, all the access to myself, Snoog. We got we're working now with doing mock drafts, all of our rookie rankings, pretty much everything you need to succeed in 2025. Snoog, Saquon Barkley was another one where in when we were talking about it in February, I said that I'm selling Christian McCaffrey for Saquon Barkley plus a first. And 90% of the community was like, Dad, you're crazy. Why are you trading Christian McCaffrey? And it's like, thinking about it, a whole year ago, that was the value. And I think that's what's the most important takeaway from running back position and from what we do at Smash Accept is predicting what's going to happen and insulating that. Because I got that deal done 3 or 4 times. Christian McCaffrey, and then I got Saquon in a first. And this year it's going to be, picks that are another elite level running back. Saquon Barkley now, absolute amazing season. He has skyrocketed up the board. Big riser on the season. I still have him as my Dynasty RB3, but as soon as Ashton Junty gets drafted, I feel like I'm moving back down to 4.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy, especially because now the Jets have the head coaching vacancy up for sale. Mm-hmm. Staying fluid in the anytime someone gets honestly, and it's crazy to say, but honestly, right now could be a good time to tear off from Gibbs and go get Bijan in a second if you can. Mm-hmm. Now is the time where you can kind of do something like that, because I think anytime there's someone that's valued extremely high, Gibbs is Dynasty 1 overall right now, but that's a ceiling. He can't go higher than Dynasty RB1 overall, right? That's where it comes down to we just go back to when CMC and Kamara and these guys were peak, and Derrick Henry where I get their peak values 2020, 2019, 2018. You could flip CMC for Kamara in a first when Kamara had a down year, right? Yeah. It's but if you just stay fluid with that process, that's how you can always accumulate value, and you can build your roster out with the rest of those picks while keeping elite assets. So, and
Saquon's at peak value right now. I mean, you look at he's going to be going into 27 years old. It's now the time to look to tier off of into that next tier, where tier 2, I have A-Chain, who for me is low-key a sell in the offseason. Breece Hall, I feel like gets a bounce back. He's a little bit of a buy. Kyron Williams, we didn't like him. We liked him, but we didn't like the process. But you can't argue he's not going anywhere. Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, those next 2 tiers. Are you looking to tier off Saquon right now? Are you looking to just say, you know what? If I can get Bucky in a first, if I can get Jonathan Taylor in a first, if I can get Josh Jacobs in a mid first, I mean, what kind of moves are we looking? Because I think this is what we got to think of is Saquon just peaked. Absolutely. And that's the biggest thing. Most podcasts, they're going to go out there and they're going to say things like, okay, it's time to sell Zach Moss. Nope, that was a year ago. But we're going to give you guys that's okay, they're at peak value. Let's talk about this. So right now you have Saquon, and I come to you and offer you Josh Jacobs in the 105.
Smashing Jacobs. Yeah,
I agree.
You hit on it when you did it. Yep, and taking Jacobs, Bucky, JT in a first, all those 3 running backs in a first is probably the lowest I would go. I think if I was going to sell Saquon, I think he's my Dynasty RB4 right now, right after Gibbs, Bijan, Junty. Then Saquon 4, then it's probably A-Chain, then it's honestly probably Jacobs, JT, without any of the other rookies, but or I would look to do where if Judkins or Caleb Johnson, one of these guys go early day 2, and you could get one of those guys in a 27 first, a trade like that I would look to do. Yeah. Otherwise, I think I'm just keeping him. I mean, I think Saquon Barkley is going to be one of those guys that everyone keeps selling because they think that his time's coming. But he's going to be good till he's 30, good till he's 31, because he's still an elite dynamic pass catcher too. And he's in Philly. Yeah, he had 2,000 rushing yards and he had a lot of carries, but they didn't hammer him at the goal line where they get majority of their wear. They were smart with that. So I think he's honestly could be a buy, could be a sell, depending on the league. But I think he's going to be one of those guys you just keep buying until he completely falls off and the wheels fall off him, like a Joe Mixon, like a Kamara, because he's better than Joe Mixon, he's better than Kamara, he's better than these guys. He really is. He's one of those Hall of Fame caliber running backs that you're he's going to be good at 30, 31, 32 years old.
And for me, it's selling to get Hall, Bucky, JT, or Jacobs, maybe James Cook,
and a first type thing.
And that's the safe way to go about it. Speaking of Bucky, and a lot of guys have been asking questions about Bucky Irving, and he's got to be the biggest Dynasty riser on the season. I mean, he went from RB 45 to now arguably I have him now as my RB 7. And I think we've really moved it up here. I mean, SquarePants 1294 says he just had an exact trade, Tracy in the 106, 209, or Bucky in the 202. and I'm taking Bucky there. I mean, I think Tracy had a fine season, but he is a fumble or two away and from losing a job. The 106 is going to be nice, but I think that 202 trades makes this a Bucky Irving trade for me. I think he's a massive riser. I think Rachaad White is still going to stay in the mix, but that's actually kind of good because Bucky's not going to get another replacement out of this class. Sean Tucker's there as the number 3. I think the Bucs are in place to have a great looking core of running backs for the 2025 season, and I'm buying Bucky Irving. What about yourself?
Yeah, I am too. The only thing that concerns me just a little bit is like I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that gets like 300 plus carries. So I just like to see him get a little like his target share was like 9%, like very low, 23 receiving yards per game. He hit that like
Rachaad White, right?
Yeah, that's what I think Rachaad White does limit Bucky's ceiling. If there's no more Rachaad White, I think Bucky's the top 5 running back in fantasy football, but he like 14.5 points per game, 250 fantasy points this year, 1,100 rushing yards, hyper efficient, like 5.5 yards per carry, elite yards after contact numbers per attempt. So his underlying metrics were great. Like everything you're looking for in like a stud rookie running back. The value is incredible. I mean, he was a great prospect. I think if Bucky Irving ran like a 4.4, I really do think if he tested well at the combine, had good shuttle times, and tested like a good athlete, I think he would have went in the 2nd or 3rd round. I think he would have been everybody's Dynasty RB1 because everybody loved him. Like when I first started watching tape on that class, Blake Corum, Bucky Irving, I thought were the clear best, most talented running backs in that class. I don't think it was close either. But throughout the process, and then it's like, okay, Bucky goes around 4. They already have Rachaad White. He tested horrible. It's like clearly the NFL wasn't high on him like they were with Achane, like they were with Gibbs. It was like, maybe it's just too good to be true with him. And Jonathan Brooks went early round 2. Corum went to the Rams in day 2, and all these like Benson went to the Cardinals in day 2. It was just a trap, I think. But for those that like shout out Dynasty Zoltan, our good friend, stayed true with that and stayed true to the process with what he saw, and it worked out for him. So I think the learning experience with that is you like a player on film coming out, you think they're very talented, they have great production, good analytics, and they get drafted in that like early day 3 range. Don't be scared, draft them, especially when there's a big discount on them. Like
that last part was huge. We're not talking about Zach Evans where they take you in the 6th and you're like, oh, you should still go in the rookie round second.
Yeah, early day 3, it's usually like something like a health issue or an injury or he's uncoachable, like something like usually like that. Late, like round 6 is just like they don't think you can play like that. You're a backup is how they're drafting you.
I'm trading for Bucky wherever I can because I feel like that hyper efficiency. I mean, you look at he was top 10 in 5 of the last 8 weeks of the season. One of those weeks, he only had 4 carries because he was a little bit banged up. I think it's similar to what we talk about with Montgomery is if either of these guys go down. I mean, I think Rachaad White is a screaming buy. You can get him for a late second. And if Bucky goes down, he's going to be an RB1. And the other way around is if Rachaad White goes down, Bucky has top 5 ceiling. So I think you definitely, you can invest both ways. Got to give a shout out to one of the guys in the Patreon, Connor Amrain. Says, did midseason startup where you guys told me to smash Gibbs in the 3rd, won the chip. Thanks, boys. That always, I love hearing those kind of things. I love that idea of just trying to, get yourself as much Gibbs as possible. I love when you hear people won their ship because of us. So who's another big time riser in that upper tier? We're going to have a lot of risers towards the end. Bucky's a big one for me. Who's a guy for you right now where you're like, his value rose like crazy, but I think it's appropriate.
Chase Brown, I think, is right there with Bucky with one of the biggest risers because he was another one of those guys. Early day 3 pick, went to a team. Like, I think you got to just trust. Like, he was a guy that a lot of the people liked in the 2023 class, especially because he tested amazing at the combine. He looked great on film. He was an older running back. I think he was like a 24-year-old rookie, but I mean, he had 16 plus fantasy points per game this year, and he was only the starter for the first like couple weeks he wasn't. So I just think, Chase Brown, I think you got to give it a Chase Brown. I mean, just barely was shy of 1,000 yards. He missed the game. No, he left the game injured too, but he was really good this year. I mean, he caught the ball well out of the backfield. He had 7 touchdowns. Like he was a guy that was performing at a high level. And like 50 plus receptions, there's everything you're looking for in a high powered offense. If he survives the draft and they don't land a Judkins or a Travion Henderson or an Ollie Gordon or one of these big guys to come in there and bully at the goal line and take down a lot of the first and second down carries, I think he's going to be a big riser. He'll be cracking my top 10 dynasty running back rankings for sure. He's not right now because I'm a little nervous about that draft capital with the Bengals, but
I have him 11 right now, and I think
he's
a huge, big time riser. You look at it, first 3 weeks, he was 7 touches or less every single week. After that, 15 or more every single week. Down the stretch, 25, 27, and he finished inside the top 12 11 times over the final 13 weeks. I mean, he was a league winner. He was someone that you invested a late second in early in the season, because I believe in my last March buys list, I had him as a late second. People that were buying there were thanking that the whole time. I was paying a late 26 first in like week 13, 14, and it paid off. Like, he won you championships here in line there. I think he's kind of an interesting spot. Like, if I could use him to tier up to one of those other guys, but I don't want to sell. You know, like, I don't want to sell unless I'm getting a 25 first plus, you know, one of those veteran running backs like we like a Connor or a Jones or a, you know, something like that, because he is in the elite level offense. Even if they draft another running back, I think Zach Moss is going to come back. He's an all right guy to have in there, because you prefer that over them drafting another running back. But the receiving game work was what made Chase Brown special this year.
Yeah,
like his receiving work down the stretch was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, you look at, he had what, 5, 11, 7, 8, 4, 3. Like, he had at least 6 targets in every single game, and he had games where he was catching 6, 7, 8 passes. You know, and that's what you really want, is an elite level offense, guy catching passes and getting those first and second down work. Love that. I mean, he's an absolute smash right now, because most people still have him 110 to 112. Like, if you won your championship and you're sitting there with 110 to 112, go buy Chase Brown. It's really going to be worth it, because I think you're going to see that value even continue to increase. For me, I'm looking at this list, and it's my RB14 right now, who's the biggest riser. And, it's unfortunate that Jonathan Brooks went down to a second ACL tear. But for Chuba Hubbard owners, and you and I were screaming it from like week 8 on, just go buy, Brooks is coming back. Just go give your 26 second for Chuba Hubbard. You'll have a decent production while Brooks comes back. Damn, we were right, but we were also wrong. Like, as soon as Brooks went down, he was putting up crazy numbers. And you got him there for a late 26 second, maybe a mid 26 second. He's absolutely worth a 25 first right now. I think if you have the 110 to 112, I would buy Chuba Hubbard, because the potential that he has in that offense. Bryce Young looked really good down the stretch. I think he was QB7 from week 13 on. Dave Canales really hyped. We talked about him in the offseason being somebody that could rise. You saw it in week 13 through 18, especially week 18, 3 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. Dude's having fun, though. You see he throws the touchdown, then looks away because he knows it's there. Confidence is everything at that quarterback position. I was buying Bryce Young for thirds and late seconds, and another great asset in that offense. They're only going to improve because the wide receiver core is trash. It's Adam Thielen and a bunch of trash. So I kind of low-key like investing in Chuba Hubbard if I give a pair of seconds, if I give the 112, because he's going to be the running back 1 the entire season. They might invest. They just use the second rounder on Brooks. They're not going to draft another guy high. They might bring in a veteran, someone that's just going to eat in a little bit. But Chuba Hubbard's a massive buy and a huge dynasty riser.
Yeah, I don't think there's a chance that they draft anybody, especially anyone worth it, right? It's Chuba Hubbard. I mean, he just had 1,200 yards,
rounder, maybe
1,200 yards in like 14 and a half games. That dude was going to have like 1,400 yards. He had double-digit touchdowns as well. So he went for like 1,210, 16 fantasy points per game. Like, he was very good. He's a big riser, big breakout guy this year. Give Dave Canales his cookies, man. Like, he came in to an absolute hellstorm of a team.
Yeah.
Turned it all around, and everyone was hating on him and doubting him early on. Bryce looked horrible early on in this season. Like, if we're just going to be honest, he was terrible last year. And terrible.
Chuba was great despite that. Like, you look at him, he had multiple RB1 weeks while Bryce was trash.
And as soon as they benched Bryce, Andy Dalton went in there and threw for like 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. So it's like, I think Bryce Young just was such a broken record from last year. I think they did it perfect with what they did. They brought in Andy Dalton, started him, let him gunsling a bunch, let Bryce Young build confidence up. Canales is a QB guru, and he brought Bryce Young back to life, brought that offense back to life, turned Chuba Hubbard into a superstar caliber running back now, and they built a good offensive line. The O-line's been great this year. The run blocking was great for Chuba Hubbard. He was efficient. They finally established the run. It's going to be Ted McMillan coming in or a T. Higgins type player, and that offense is going to take off. And I think that
don't you take Ted away from Boston. Let him go.
They're in a horrible division too. All the defenses are terrible in that division. I just think it's such a win-win for all Panthers players if they can build and keep building with Dave Canales. So yeah, Chuba Hubbard's a big riser for me as well.
We were talking about this backstage, but it's tough when you're the RB1 overall in the past and you go ahead and you get a new rushing quarterback and all of a sudden everybody writes you off for dead. But Jonathan Taylor went from you couldn't sell him in Dynasty around week 10, week 12 to whoa, like down the stretch, my man looked like vintage Jonathan Taylor. He was going there, putting up 150 plus, multiple touchdowns. And Jonathan Taylor is all of a sudden just back in that Dynasty radar where I moved him back up to Dynasty RB8. You could argue 7. You could argue 6. He's someone that if you bought low, congratulations to you. I'm still buying because I think something just clicked. I think they started to figure out the offense a little bit more. Anthony Richardson doesn't seem like the answer, but at the same time, I think they figured out the offense down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that had 1,400 plus yards in like 13, 14 games. I mean, he was averaging like 102 yards per game, double-digit touchdowns, 17 fantasy points per game. We are getting, if JT played a full season, there's a chance we got vintage, like 300 plus point Jonathan Taylor and an offense that, didn't find their rhythm, couldn't find their identity, but their identity and their rhythm is Jonathan Taylor. It's through that run game. That's how you ease off on Richardson. That's how Flacco was successful in that offense, if at all. I mean, that's how he had his success, was running the ball, and then gunsling. Jonathan Taylor is a workhorse running back. It's that simple. He's like 25, 26 years old. He's new age he's new age Nick Chubb, in my opinion. Like, that's what he is. He's going to be a guy that's good for another 2 to 3 years, and he's going to be 1,200 or 1,500 yards rushing, double-digit touchdowns, and he's going to finish top 5 to 7 every single year. So I just think as long as he's healthy. So I just think, he went from a guy that you couldn't sell anywhere to a guy that now got a bunch of value back, but people still probably want to sell him. So he could be a good buy low too, but he's a big riser.
If we pay attention, week 1 through 4 before he was injured, he had 4 touchdowns. He had 200-yard games, an 88-yard game, multiple receptions. He gets injured at the end of that week, misses 5, 6, and 7. And then 8 through 13, a couple RB2 weeks, nothing crazy. They get the bye week, and then all of a sudden he comes out and goes ham. And it's like, I don't think people realize injuries do matter. Like we just look at the stats sometimes, but he might be out there grinding, just trying to help his team on some of those, where we're like, maybe he came back a little bit earlier than he should have. But the way he played down the stretch, the final 5 weeks, 25 plus carries in every one but one. He had 6 touchdowns. Like Jonathan Taylor is someone that you should be reinvesting in Dynasty. We did our running back rookie show, and I mean, we keep getting a lot of questions like this where Old Dirty Blair says, half PPR Dynasty, do you trade the 101 for the 103 and 106? So Snoog, we know it's a running back heavy class. We know Ashton Junty seems like the real deal, but you're talking 103 and 106. Let's say you're running back needy. You get Caleb and Quinshawn at 103 and 106. You taking 2 shots or 1 here?
That's tough. I'm taking 2.
Yeah, I am too right now. I think I've changed off that a little bit, and I think we've gotten to that.
Would you rather, if Ashton Junty goes 10 to the Bears or he goes 12 to Dallas, right? Wherever they pick, top 12, versus Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Johnson going in the second round to the Chargers and the Raiders. Who would you rather? Like, what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
I don't care how good of a prospect you are. The right draft capital with elite running back prospects and situations, anything's up for grab. Remember when back in the pre-draft, or it was like post-combine, I put Bijan and Gibbs in the same tier. Nobody liked that. I literally went back and looked through that tweet last night, and there was like a million people in that. Like, this is terrible. Why are you doing? Like, Bijan clears Gibbs, is this, that. But yeah, as a prospect, people viewed it like that. But as prospects, I viewed them damn near similar. Like
they were still saying that 6 weeks ago,
exactly. So it's like,
and up until last week, there were 3 points separating them. Now there's even more, and it's Gibbs above. And I think with this 25 class, we have a lot of guys that we really like, but it really makes you think about the running back position. Right now, I have 14 running backs worth of first because, Gibbs, Bijan, Saquon, Achane, Hall, Williams, Bucky, Taylor, Cook, Jacobs, Brown, Walker, McCaffrey, Hubbard. That's it. For me, and you have to look at this. Everybody says, well, Dad, 2 weeks ago you were saying buy Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, those guys for first. I know, but the season's over. You don't have to anymore.
Tell me this.
We go out and we buy those guys who increase in value. Should never happen, but Mixon and Henry increase in value this year.
Where do the 49ers pick? They're definitely top 12, right? Because they're like 6 and 12. Yeah. The 49ers go out there and take Ashton Jundy with their first round pick. Are you taking them over Gibbs or Bijan?
What are they doing with Christian McCaffrey?
It's just like a hypothetical. I don't think it's gonna happen, but like,
oh yeah, we both comped him to Christian.
No one
McCaffrey,
thought the Lions were gonna take Gibbs, right? Like, it made no sense, but they did. Like,
that makes sense.
Like, if Christian McCaffrey, they just paid him, but they also didn't know he had Achilles tendonitis in both Achilles. Like, he could be damn near well done before you know it. Like, we don't know. We don't know anything. I'm just saying, like, hypothetical. Unless you think they rat out Jordan Mason, which they could. Who Jordan Mason is. We have two. I have 2 more risers. I'll talk a little quick on Jordan Mason because we're already on that topic. But I think Jordan Mason's a big riser. Just looking at the metrics from when he was a starter, he was averaging like 90 plus rushing yards per game. He was very good pure runner. He's never going to be RB1 overall, but he could be a guy that cracks the top 10 multiple times as the starter. Just a pure rushing machine in a great offense where he's going to score double-digit touchdowns. So I think he's a good riser and a very good buy low because he's probably worth a third right now. But my main last guy is Josh Jacobs. We talked about this behind the show started. This is a guy that came off a ridiculous year and then had a very big down year last year. And we knew he was leaving the Raiders. The Raiders were terrible. No offensive line, no quarterback play. It was just a disaster. Comes to a good offensive line, but a great coaching staff with a good QB in an offense that's in an environment that's building in Green Bay, coming off winning the divisional round and going to to play the 49ers in that semis round. So I think what the Packers did with Josh Jacobs, they gave him a 4-year deal. I know it's like $40 million, but I don't know what the guarantees are, but I'm pretty sure they can get out of the contract. They're not getting out of the contract.
No,
he proved it this year. Why you stick and pick him. Just shy of 300 fantasy points, 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. I think he was top 5 in the NFL in touchdowns at the running back position. He was phenomenal this year, and I loved how they used him. It's like the main thing that I liked about Josh Jacobs this year is they actually like used him properly, and they didn't they used a lot of Emmanuel Wilson when they didn't need to use Josh Jacobs, and that's what you need to see for the longevity of Josh Jacobs. But with Josh Jacobs, everyone thinks he's probably 28, 29 years old. The kid is 26.
He's been around forever. He came out. That's why
when he was in
Bama,
Bama, his workload was so light. Like he barely was. He was never a workhorse there because of how many guys they had. So he came into the league young with light tread on his tires. I think he's a guy. He's in my top 8 to 9 running backs right now before the rookies come in. I think he's a guy that is going to give you 2 to 3 more very good productive years, and he has that top 3 ceiling in this range of outcomes, in my opinion.
And the more I hear you talk about him, the more I'm like. Quinshon Judkins, who you already are comping to him, light usage in college, someone that's going to come in and just, very similar play style. I'm so excited about rookies. But you brought up Jordan Mason, and I think we got to talk about this quick. Is running back, all the last couple guys we mentioned, Derrick Henry went up in value, Joe Mixon went up in value, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, all free agent running backs, all guys that in the offseason got new homes. This year, we don't have those big, sexy names, but some of these guys right now that I think are in for value bumps, if you pick them up on the cheap right now, you mentioned Jordan Mason. I'm going to mention Jaylen Warren. I think Jaylen Warren has flashed at times of an excellent efficiency PPR back, someone that I think is goes to the right situation, could really pop off. J.K. Dobbins is a free agent. I think he ends up coming back. Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones. It's not a sexy free agent grouping. You know what I mean? But I think you still have to at least pay attention to Aaron Jones, likely comes back to Minnesota. Najee's likely back with the Steelers. Javonte Williams could be interesting because, man, does he need a change of scenery. Like, the Denver offense played so well, but he played so poorly. You know, this is just some guys that you need to pay attention to a little bit more. For me, though, the most attractive two are Jordan Mason and Jaylen Warren. They're going to be in complementary roles, but Jordan Mason proved that for a short period of time, he can handle the workload. He can build it up there. Snoog, I love doing these riser shows. I love doing the rookie shows just to kind of show where things are at. Right now, like I said, there are 14 running backs that I believe are worth a first, and then we fall off. I mean, this is what's interesting about the Dynasty landscape is you have that next tier, Henry, Kamara, Montgomery. They're going to be fine, right? No worries at all. But then you got Pacheco, Tracy, Robinson, Pollard. You know, I'm okay with Connor and Jones, Etienne, Najee, Dobbins, Stevenson, Swift. I mean, a lot of these guys are going to lose jobs because this class is that good. What I'm advocating to, and we're going to talk about this in the Sellers show, but what I'm advocating to a lot of people is let's get away from this running back uncertainty right now because the running back certainty is going to be in the rookie draft and in elite veterans.
Yeah.
There's about 18 of them. The other 14 ambiguous situations, they're about to lose jobs.
Yeah, you don't buy any of other than the guys we just kind of highlighted and like those maybe top 12. I don't think it's worth buying running backs until after the rookie or after the NFL draft. But three names that just come to mind of guys that I think are one guy isn't safe, and that's Tajay Spears. I don't think he's safe, but I think if going into next year, if they decide to kind of lean more on him than Pollard, I think he's going to be a great value. But Kendre Miller, Travis Etienne, I think are both guys that are safe because Kendrick's playing behind Kamara. They just paid Kamara. I don't see them wasting a pick on a running back when they have so many other needs they need to fulfill. And Travis Etienne's a guy that is in contract next year. I think he's way too talented for the production he put up this year. I think he is a dynamic runner. I think he's very good in the space and very good in the passing game, and the Jags can never unlock that with him. Ben Johnson's interviewing with the Jaguars. If the Jaguars land Ben Johnson, Trevor Lawrence is healthy. They just drafted Brian Thomas Jr. Evan Ingram comes back. Christian Kirk comes back. That offense could have a huge turnaround, a big bounce back. And I think Travis Etienne will be a big part of that as well with Ben Johnson, a guy that has been typically good with running backs that are like this type of style, like Jahmyr Gibbs, DeAndre Swift, guys that get in space. So I think that could be a big revival for Travis Etienne. He could find his way back into that top 12 dynasty rankings because it's a thing that happens a lot where running backs have big years and then fall off tremendously the next year. There's times that they come back. There's times they don't come back. So that's the risk you play with Travis Etienne, but you're paying probably I've seen him getting traded for 26 seconds. I'd pay that 10 times out of 10 for that upside.
The other guy that I'm going to bring up before we close out here is a guy that I was big on in the offseason. You were taking a crap on him,
I was
James
not
Cook,
big on this guy. I was not big
he
on
went
this guy.
crazy. I mean, I was even a little bit like, yo, Ray Davis really going to eat into this to get the touchdowns. And James Cook had 18 touchdowns this year. 18. I mean, that's just unheard of because Josh Allen was still getting his. And I think he really deserves some more credit than he got. I have him inside my top 10 dynasty running backs. I don't think he's going anywhere. Buffalo, again, they invested in Ray Davis. So that they need offensive wide receiver weapons and they need defensive help. So I don't think they're going to bring in any more running backs. So James Cook is one of those guys I still think is a safe dynasty buy that right now I'd pay 108 because we talk about it. There's a lot of running backs that we like in this class. You like Omarion Hampton, that's good, but Omarion Hampton's not going to be in Buffalo. Like you want that running back in Buffalo. And I think Cook has just been he's been a lot of teams' savior for this particular season.
Before we close out, this is a guy that was on absolute fire at the first couple of stretch of the games and then slowed down. But Kenneth Walker, 16.5 points per game. He only played in 11, but he was so hot and cold this year. That's kind of been his career so far, is hot and cold. But
yeah,
he was so good he had like what? I think 7. I think he had like 9 touchdowns and he had 8 touchdowns and 11 games, and he was so good. He caught so many passes too for some weird. He had 46 receptions in 11 games. They just fired their offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. Is this a guy that you're buying low on? Is this a guy that you could see have like finally hit his stride, finally hit that consistent like 16, 17 game season where he's top 5, top 8 finisher because the talent's there. The O-line stinks, but the talent's there.
Yeah.
I'm so polarized on him because he's someone I love the player, but I just like, he just drives me insane to own.
I liked him coming out. I absolutely have 0 shares now. I have tons of Charbonnet because he was cheap. Because when he misses time, Charbonnet doesn't miss a beat.
Yeah, I was gonna say Charbonnet just gotta own then, because Charbonnet's always ready to go.
If I'm in a startup draft and I got to take Walker in the 5th or Charbonnet in the 10th, to me I'm taking Charbonnet. Just kind of taking which guy's going to perform, because Charbonnet still puts up okay points when Walker's still playing, but he had more RB1 season or more RB1 weeks than what Walker did. So that's where it's like, I think you can get Walker in an insulated trade and you can kind of be smart with it, or you could give like
that's probably the move.
A veteran running back plus a second for Walker. I'm not bullish on it, but I loved him coming out. I really did. And he's flashed. He just doesn't seem to stay on.
Travion Henderson has that same type, like all those little injuries, the soft tissue injuries, but he has that just elite elusiveness, that crazy like power and space and that contact value. That's the comp. Travion Henderson, Kenneth Walker, very similar players. They're probably both going to be. Travion's going to join him as a day 2 pick, but it's a fun player, very fun player. But I just think he's a guy that needs that right coaching staff that can get him unlocked. Yeah. He just needs, like, if he was in Miami or in San Fran where he's hitting like bust size holes and just making people miss, he'd be phenomenal. But I think it's the Seattle trying to use him between the tackles and have him gain out the tough yards. I think it's a lot tougher for his play style. Just don't think they know how to use him right. But I'm excited to see how he kind of pans out, because he's someone I'm like, do I buy low on him or do I kind of hold him? What do I do with him? So
this is I get mad when I see people call this the off season. This is not the off season. This is the Dynasty prime season. Time. This is where you put yourself in position to dominate your leagues. In 25 and 26. No better place to do that than the Smash Accept Patreon. We are up to almost 480 members. Guys are in there talking shop all the time. I keep saying it, guys. It's the best kept secret. I know a lot of those guys won't share, even though we offer a referral bonus. We've only ever had 2 people ever use it because they said they want to beat their friends. Same kind of thing. YouTube page is really starting to pick up. If you guys enjoy the show, share it with a friend or two, start to get that name out there. It's time to, smash in the off season. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process. Nobody wants to share it. You know what I mean? Just